Hello and welcome back, I'm Xiaoling. So, I've spent around 10 hours or so playing Call of Duty World War II Open Beta, and I thought I'd share my impressions with you all. I haven't played a Call of Duty game since Modern Warfare 2. I found the multiplayer to eventually wear a little thin, and I moved on to more tactical first-person shooters. And every year I'd see another iteration of Call of Duty released, and every year it basically seemed to be the same game all over again, except with a new coat of paint. So right off the bat, I'm going to start off by saying Call of Duty World War II is yet another Call of Duty with another coat of paint. And this is probably not going to be a surprise to anyone. The beta had 4 6v6 modes: Team Deathmatch, Domination, Hardpoint, and War. With the exception of War, which I'll talk about in a little bit, all of the other modes were your typical Call of Duty style maps, sprinting around, occasionally slowing down to kill enemies, being killed by enemies, respawning and sprinting around some more. Basically playing the game on autopilot. Of course, the domination modes add capture points as well, so you can add sprinting around between points into that equation over and over and over again. The maps were all pretty small, and the time to kill and the time to die were very, very fast. Medals were rewarded for basically doing anything except moving around, so perhaps to make players feel good about constantly accomplishing something, I don't know. One wonders why it's necessary, and if it's necessary, to constantly bombard players with all these notifications of the so-called achievements that they're getting throughout the match. As I said, kill streaks are back, as are kill streak rewards, but they have different names this time to fit the World War II settings. But if we have to be entirely honest, come on, they're all the same as before: recon strikes, air strikes, etc, etc. Nothing has really changed. Coming from playing tactical games that actually require some thought to mindless running around to get as many kills as possible, with little to no semblance of any kind of teamwork, is the reason I stopped playing Call of Duty in the first place. So the experience wasn't great. Now, I'm not saying there weren't moments of enjoyment. The series has done well for a reason. Some people do enjoy this type of gameplay, and for what type of gameplay it is, it does it relatively well, I suppose. But nothing stood out as particularly interesting, new, or innovative. It's basically the same Call of Duty I've played many, many years ago. The war mode was for sure the most interesting of the modes in the beta. As the attackers, you'd have to capture a German outpost within a certain amount of time. If your team was successful, then you'd then move on to the next objective, which would be to build a bridge. Then you had to destroy an ammo cache, and finally you'd have to escort a tank to the final objectives. And of course, as the defenders, you'd have to stop the attackers from succeeding. Having the added objectives and the enemy team not constantly spawn behind you for a change added some semblance of structure to the mode. There was basically a front line, and your team could push toward the front line, which required some degree of teamwork at least to succeed. In theory, of course, this all sounds great, but because of the nature of Call of Duty, there was no communication. Everyone is just rushing in and dying, respawning and rushing in again, until eventually either you lose the map because you run out of time, or you capture the point because you overwhelm the enemy, who is basically doing the same thing on their side, and then you wash, rinse and repeat for the next objective. And as much as I like this idea, I found it to be more of a frustration than any of the other modes in the beta, purely because of the lack of teamwork and losing for that exact reason. Now, sure, people are eventually going to learn how the mode works, what the good camping spots are, and what to do, but I was constantly asking myself, you know, if this is the kind of mode that you enjoy playing, where you're pushing objectives and you require teamwork, why would you choose playing Call of Duty World War II over something like Battlefield 1, for example, which does all of this on a much grander scale, and it also does it much better? Like all of the other Call of Duty games, you level up your character, you earn stars. The stars unlock new weapons for the different classes. There are different classes which fall under different divisions, so as you level up your division, you earn new perks for that division, so vaulting faster, aiming down sights quicker, that kind of thing. And finally, each weapon has levels as well, so you get more kills with each weapon, you unlock new slots for the weapon, and then you'll get new modifications for said weapon, so sights and stocks and barrels and that kind of thing. Add some customization at least to the weapons that you use. There were some character customization options as well. I imagine there will be more of all of this in the final release. But some things did stand out as kind of odd to me. For example, when you choose infantry, you get to choose either the US infantry or infantry from Netherlands, so you get sort of a different visual look for your uniform. And there are a number of different facial presets, both male and female, and different races that you can choose to play. But there was no way to choose what your character looked like when you were playing on the Axis side. This was probably a limitation of the beta. At any rate, on top of that, if you used an M1 Garand as infantry, an American rifle obviously, and you were playing on the German side, you would still be using the US rifle, which struck me as a little bit odd. Also, if you chose a black female avatar and then you played on the Nazi side, you would be a black female Nazi, essentially talking German, which was kind of strange indeed. So on top of the shallow gameplay, the game is not going to have any semblance of historical accuracy whatsoever. So if that's what you're looking for, you're going to be looking in the wrong place. Now, during my time with the game, I never had any performance issues. The frame rate was silky smooth and it never dropped below 120 for the most part. But the game had small levels and it doesn't necessarily have cutting edge graphics either. So something like Battlefield 1 looks better in my opinion. Also, I never came across any network issues or disconnects or anything like that, despite the game being P2P as far as I can tell. However, it did crash a few times, which forced me to restart the game. But I do want to add, though, there are many folks who are citing that they've had performance issues with this particular game, even with top-end hardware. So my experience isn't going to necessarily reflect the performance that the majority of people had. One just needs to take a look at the Steam reviews to see the complaints that people have. I believe it's sitting on mostly negative at the moment, which is not a good sign for the game at all. So yeah, Call of Duty World War II multiplayer is pretty disappointing. I understand that they don't want to change the core of what Call of Duty is, since this has been quite a successful franchise for Activision. But the lack of innovation here surprises me, and I think it's going to hurt the release. This is just a copy of a game that I played 8 years ago with better graphics, and that's kind of sad. There's so many interesting first-person shooters coming out now with evolving mechanics and new things that they're trying out. I think that Call of Duty also needs to do that if they want to stay relevant. People are getting tired of buying the same game with a different coat of paint year in and year out. Anyways, that is what I have to say about Call of Duty. This new version has not convinced me to climb back onto the Call of Duty train. Thanks very much for watching. I've been Xiaoling. Until next time.